There are people who do dread Lent for a specific reason, which can be a stumbling block for them. And that is maybe a crisis of conscience. Maybe they're a bit scrupulous, maybe not. But they go into Lent and they don't really know what they're supposed to do. And so they're constantly in doubt as to whether or not they're making a good Lent. For example, the rule about fasting is generally one full meal, and in days of partial abstinence, they can have meat at the main meal once a day. And then two smaller meals, which together, well, they're meatless, and the two smaller meals together cannot equal the quantity of the main meal, okay? That sounds like a fairly simple formula, but for some people, it's very hard for them to gauge this, and their meals might be somewhat irregular, too. You know, they're working and taking care of children and so on, and they're trying to make the best of something of a chaotic lifestyle because of demands made upon them. They might find themselves in a situation where they're always worried. You know, am I fasting? Am I observing the fast? Well, I mean, if I find myself taking care of children during the day and I'm getting a little weak and a little crabby, and I realize, gee, I need to take a bite of something to get my metabolism where it should be. Am I committing a mortal sin by doing that? You know, people have sometimes these worries, and now I can understand the concerns people have about that. You know, we talk about those who just dread making any sacrifices. These are people, rather, who are conscientious, who want to do the best they can, but under the circumstances, you know, they find it hard to know that they're actually keeping the fast. And that's the problem they're having. Not because they don't want to fast, because they do. But circumstances might make it very difficult for them, and they don't know exactly where to draw the line. I mean, if somebody, practically speaking, says, okay, well, I had two smaller meals today, so now I have to make a main meal, and I have to eat more than I ate at those other two meals. So I better keep eating until I'm sure that I eat more at my main meal than I ate at the two previous meals, right? The letter of the law. I have to, you know, obviously that's a formula for disaster right there. And also, you know, there's the standard things. Well, I'm fixing the main meal, and I tasted the soup, and it had beef broth in it, because you can have that at the main meal, but I tasted it while I was making it just to make sure it was right. And now, you know, is that it? Can I have meat at the main meal now? You know, or have I already, you know, had my dose of meat for the day? People scruple about that. Understand, but this is an indication, not that they don't want to keep the fast, it's because they do. Now that I can understand, that can be a problem. God does not want people scrupling about things like that and troubled about that. And so what I tell them is, look, basically, as far as the quantity of food you take, if you're really earnestly trying to keep the fast and you're wondering, well, did I eat too much? Well, try as far as possible to, you know, observe that program of two smaller meals. But I would say, look, one way you know you're fasting is if you're hungry. If you go through Lent and you're not hungry, you're never hungry, you're not fasting. So if you eat enough in the morning so that you get through the morning, you have the strength to fulfill your obligations, but by lunchtime, you're hungry, then you know, okay, I'm fasting. I'm hungry, I take my noonday meal, whatever, and that satisfies me for the time. I'm not hungry. But by the evening meal, I'm actually feeling hungry. You know, the fasting is so that you experience what hunger is as really the sensation of fasting, as it were, to undergo that mortification. If you're keeping yourself full enough all the time that you never experience what it is to feel hungry, then you're very unlikely fasting. So anyway, you know, as a practical thing, that's what I tell people to go by. So try to keep the other prescriptions regarding the fasting, but look for that as a real indication of whether it's a real fast for you or not. And that is a very subjective thing. That's a very individual thing. Depends upon your metabolism, your bodily needs, depends upon your duties of state and life and how much energy you need to get through. So, I mean, when you talk about fasting, you can set down a hard fast rule for everybody, but it doesn't apply to everybody. You know, it really is a very personal thing as to what I am doing to mortify my sensual appetites. And I think for each one of us, it would come down to that. Am I hungry? And I get the time for the next meal. Now, if somebody approaches Lent with the idea that I have so many things to do and so many responsibilities, and I have a very difficult time observing the fast and still meeting all my other obligations, well, that person should talk to a traditional priest in whom they have confidence to advise them. And it could be that they're really not obliged to the fast or the strict fast because the obligations of life require them to just take more nourishment. So if somebody's trying to do what is morally impossible, yeah, I can see that being discouraged by that fact, because no one is obliged to do that. But if they find it that a burden that blocks them from fulfilling the duties of their state in life, they should talk to a priest about to see what exactly they are obliged to do.